Beltane week on my Patreon. Today is the 1st of May, and traditionally Beltane is celebrated on May's Eve, so yesterday evening, but a lot of people, they celebrate it the first weekend of May. So I really wanted, for my first of my stories for adults on my Patreon, I really wanted it to be a story which reminds me of the Beltane. One that sings of the magic and the wildlife that we have in this country and in the world. And the story that comes to mind is called The Queen of the Birds. It involves a little wander of the hedgerow, the wren, one of my favourite birds. Always seems to appear when I'm feeling a little bit low or need a little bit of a reminder that I just need to keep going. That's what the wren does for me. There's a lot of folklore surrounding the wren though. She maybe is associated with witches and witchcraft because she is seen to be a bird of prophecy and of divination. She's also mixed up in some maritime folklore as a siren that would sing sailors onto the rocks, and I'm not sure about that. She'd have to be a long way from home, our little Jenny Wren, wouldn't she? There's also some talk of her being a shapeshifter, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding her, and it's considered very bad luck to kill the wren. However, there is a festival celebrated in the Celtic traditions where towards the end of the winter there is a wren hunt, and a wren is killed and stuffed and stuck on the top of a stick and paraded through the villages in order to welcome in the summer and to banish winter. It's an interesting tradition, and yes, very barbaric, not one that is actually carried out today still, although there are some simulations of it, shall we say, but the wren itself is not killed. Thankfully, we've moved past that. So how did this little bird come to be wrapped up in this story of the Queen of the Birds, I wonder? Wrens, if you're not familiar with wrens, are about sort of golf ball size, and they've got a little tail which sticks up at the end and tiny little beaks, but their call is not so tiny. It's very, very shrill. And if you've ever heard a wren, you'll know it was a wren because it's a very shrill sound. It comes from around knee waist height. They're normally about that high, and it trills right at the end. So that you'll know is a wren. This tiny little bird, how did it come to be in this story? Well, here it is. This is the story of the Queen of the Birds. A long time ago, the animals were talking. The mammals, they had a king, that was the lion. The reptiles, they too had a king, the crocodile. And, well, the fish, whilst it wasn't quite a fish, definitely saw the whale as their king. The birds, they didn't yet have a king. And so it was the birds that were doing the majority of the talking. They were all stood around squawking and quacking and calling and singing and trying to decide who was the king, when the little Jenny Wren spoke up. "Why on earth can't it be a queen?" "Don't be ridiculous," said the eagle. "Surely it should be a king, and I am the obvious choice. I am king." Well, you might think that if you looked at an eagle, a majestic animal, huge wingspan, enormous hooked, glorious beak. It's a hunting, killing machine, and definitely a king of beasts. But was it the right one for the job? Little Jenny Wren didn't think so. "I am very busy, I work hard, and I look after the hedgerows," said the little wren. "I am a good example to our subjects that small birds matter too." Well, the eagle just laughed. And eventually, the flightless birds, who had quite frankly had enough of all this talk, suggested that they had a race. And they said that they would be the judges. The ostriches, the emus, the kiwis, the penguins, they would stay on the ground and judge the race and watch to see how high all of the birds that could fly could fly. And when one of them was left, flying the highest up there in the clear blue sky, that would be the one that was crowned king. Because you see, they still believed that the eagle would win. And so the ostrich called and the race began. It was the smaller birds that were the first to drop out of the race, like the dunnocks and the sparrows and the birds of the hedgerow. And everybody truly expected the wren to have dropped out by this point, but nobody could see the wren. So they waited for the next lot of birds as they got higher and higher, and there the great tits and the blue tits, they worried that if they got too close to the sun it might burn their little heads and then they wouldn't have the colours that they did. And so they too dropped out, happy to watch the others fly higher and higher. Next, it was the finches. They were bobbing and weaving and chiff chaff, and the yellowhammer with its little bit of bread and no cheese. The chaffinch, the chiff chaff, the yellowhammer, the greenfinch, they all came down to land, tired from their exertions and their attempts to fly higher than eagle. They hadn't managed it. Next was a quacking and a honking and a hissing as the ducks and the geese and the swans battled for the next one up in the sky, higher and higher and higher. These were well-seasoned flyers. They migrated every year across the Alps. They knew how to fly high, but none of them could fly as high as the eagle, and they had to give up too. And then came the squawking of cranes and the chatter of flamingos. They were getting higher with their huge wings and their long, thin, rudder-like legs, higher and higher and higher and higher, but they couldn't catch eagle either. And eventually, with a triumphant "Ah!" the eagle saw that he was the highest. He had reached the highest point in the sky, and he circled around and around and around on the thermals until he saw that nobody was going to beat him. And just as he started his descent down to gloat in his triumph, out from the ruff of his white neck hopped little wren, little tiny golf ball wren, up into the sky, her wings fluttering up into the sky. And there she was. She said, "Eagle, you are not king. I am queen." And she started to make her descent too. And when they both reached the ground, it could not be denied that wren had flown higher than eagle. And eagle had to concede that wren, wily little hard-working busy wren, had beaten him, and she would be crowned queen of the birds. I love that story for its triumph over adversity and the arrogance of eagle and the hard-working wily wren. While I was researching that story, I came across a few interesting facts which I thought I'd share with you. Most birds, they don't get above about 500 feet just in their day-to-day flying around. But as they fly higher, some of the birds that fly a bit higher, they fly to about 2,000 or 5,000 feet. But not many birds get above 20,000 feet when they're migrating. And that's a pretty long way up, isn't it? The highest bird, the one that flew the highest that was recorded, was a Ruffles Vulture, which unfortunately got sucked into a jet engine. I know, pretty gruesome. Got sucked into a jet engine, and it was flying at almost 39,000 feet. Now, aeroplanes, they normally fly between 25 and 30,000 feet. Obviously, to avoid incidents like that, nobody expects a Ruffles Vulture up there. But that day, there was one. So I shall leave you with that fact. There are some birds that can fly even higher than the eagle and the wren. I'll see you next time. Toodle pip.